The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly as I pulled weeds from my front garden. My hands, still bearing calluses from years of military service, worked methodically through the soil. Sweat trickled down my back, but I welcomed the simple physical labor after so many years of high-stakes operations. After dedicating my life to protecting others as a Navy SEAL, I had finally found peace in this quiet suburban neighborhood. My transition to civilian life had not been entirely smooth. The nightmares still came sometimes, and loud noises could still trigger an immediate combat response. But watching my 7-year-old daughter Emma grow up in safety made everything worthwhile. She played with her dolls on the porch, occasionally calling out for me to look at new arrangements she had created. Her voice always pulled me back to the present when my mind wandered to darker places. This was why I had fought. This was what mattered now. My thoughts scattered when two shadows fell across my lawn. I looked up, shielding my eyes against the sun. Two men in matching navy blue polo shirts stood at the edge of my property. They clutched clipboards and wore expressions of practiced authority. The taller one had a receding hairline and glasses that kept sliding down his nose. The shorter man was stocky with an attempt at a well-groomed beard that failed to hide his weak chin. "Good afternoon, sir. I am Richard Caldwell, and this is my associate Michael Perkins. We represent the Oak Meadows Homeowners Association." The taller man spoke with a rehearsed confidence that immediately put me on alert. "We need to discuss several violations on your property that require immediate remediation." I stood slowly, wiping my hands on my jeans. There must be some mistake. I did not join any HOA when I purchased this house 6 months ago. Perkins consulted his clipboard with exaggerated thoroughness. "Your property is within HOA jurisdiction regardless of your personal participation. The covenant runs with the land. Your fence height exceeds regulations by 8 inches, Caldwell continued, pointing toward my backyard. The play structure was installed without proper approval, and these garden beds extend beyond the approved landscaping footprint. My training had taught me to identify threats quickly. Something felt wrong about their approach, too aggressive, too demanding. "May I see documentation of these regulations?" Caldwell produced a folder containing papers with an official-looking letterhead. "The full regulations are available at the community office. These are just the violation notices. Each infraction carries a daily fine until resolved." I examined the papers carefully. The language was deliberately confusing, full of legal jargon and references to bylaws I had never seen. My closing documents made no mention of an HOA. My lawyer would have flagged that. "Perhaps your lawyer was negligent," Perkins suggested with a condescending smile. "But that does not exempt you from compliance. I need to verify this association actually exists and has jurisdiction before discussing any supposed violations," I stated firmly. Their demeanor shifted instantly. The bureaucratic facade cracked, revealing something harder underneath. "We can place liens on your property," Caldwell said, voice dropping lower. "Noncompliance will become very expensive very quickly." "I appreciate the warning," I replied evenly, though my internal alert system was now fully activated. "But I will need to consult my attorney before proceeding." "We will return in 3 days for your response," Caldwell said. "I suggest you come into compliance rather than fighting this." As they walked away, I noticed how they studied other houses on the street, making notes on their clipboards. The confrontation had planted the first seed of suspicion in my mind. Their insistence on compliance, despite my non-membership, set off the same warning signals I had relied on in combat zones. Something was very wrong here, and my instincts rarely failed me. I watched them until they disappeared around the corner, then turned to see Emma watching me with concerned eyes. "Who were those men, Daddy? Are we in trouble?" "No, sweetheart," I assured her, though I was already formulating a plan. "Everything is fine, just some confused people who came to the wrong house." But I knew this was just the beginning, and confusion had nothing to do with it. My military training taught me to gather intelligence before taking action. Fighting blind gets people killed. That lesson had saved my life numerous times in hostile territory, and I suspected it would serve me well in this situation too. The morning after the encounter with the supposed HOA representatives, I began my investigation. The county clerk's office was housed in a beige government building downtown. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as I waited for the clerk to retrieve property records for my neighborhood. The young woman behind the counter seemed surprised by my request to see all HOA registrations for Oak Meadows subdivision. "Most people just call the association directly," she commented as she pulled up the records on her computer. "I prefer primary sources," I replied. After 20 minutes of searching, she confirmed what I had suspected. No legitimate homeowners association existed in our neighborhood. The documents showed attempts to establish one when the development was first built 15 years ago, but it had never legally formed. The developer had gone bankrupt before completing the process. "There is no active HOA registered for that subdivision," she concluded, printing the official records for me. "There never has been." Armed with this knowledge, I began approaching my neighbors. I started with the elderly couple down the street, the Wilsons. They had lived in the neighborhood since the first homes were built. Mrs. Wilson invited me in for coffee, while Mr. Wilson shuffled through a file cabinet in their study. "We always thought it was odd," Mrs. Wilson said, placing a mug in front of me. "They just showed up about 2 years ago, claiming to represent an association that no one had heard of before." "But they had paperwork," Mr. Wilson added, returning with a folder. "Official-looking documents. When you get to our age, you learn not to make waves." His hands trembled as he showed me receipts for violations totaling over $5,000. Improperly stored trash cans, unauthorized holiday decorations, unapproved window treatments. The charges were both petty and substantial. "We did not want them to put a lien on our home," Mrs. Wilson explained, her voice quavering. "This house is all we have." Over the next 3 days, I spoke with 14 different neighbors. Their stories followed the same pattern. The enforcers targeted vulnerable residents, single parents, working families, elderly couples. Those who questioned the authority were threatened with escalating fines and legal action. Those who could not pay found themselves facing increasingly hostile visits. Sarah Johnson, a single mother 3 houses down, described how they had become more aggressive over time. "They started with small things, the color of my mailbox, the height of my bushes. When I told them I could not afford the fines, they started finding more violations. I established a surveillance routine, watching from my kitchen window as Caldwell and Perkins made their rounds. They moved with a precision that reminded me of tactical operations, though perverted for greed rather than mission success. They arrived at predictable times, targeted specific homes, and maintained detailed records of their extortion. On the 3rd evening, I followed them at a distance, maintaining visual contact while ensuring they never spotted me. My years of surveillance training made this almost too easy. They drove to a small rental property 5 miles away, a nondescript house in a commercial area with a hastily made sign declaring it the Oak Meadows Community Association office. Through the front window, I could see a small operations center. Maps of the neighborhood hung on walls with properties marked in different colors. Filing cabinets presumably contained their fraudulent records. A desktop computer likely held their financial information. The pieces of their scam began fitting together like a threat assessment in hostile territory. I retreated to my vehicle and called Davis, an old friend who had served as our unit's JAG lawyer before entering private practice specializing in real estate law. "What you are describing is fraud, extortion, and impersonating officials," Davis said after I explained the situation. "But proving it will require documentation. Lots of it." "Documentation I can handle," I replied, thinking of the skills I had honed overseas. "What I need is a legal strategy. Gather evidence, build a case, then we can take it to the authorities," Davis advised. "But be careful. People running this kind of scam tend to get desperate when cornered." I had no idea how prophetic those words would prove to be, or how soon I would find myself using skills I had hoped to leave behind in war zones. They returned on a Tuesday afternoon, exactly 3 days after our first encounter. I was prepared this time, with a discreet recording device tucked in my shirt pocket, and the county records proving no HOA existed readily accessible on my phone. Emma built a sandcastle in her play area near the side yard, occasionally glancing up at the approaching figures. Caldwell and Perkins marched up my driveway with printed documents that looked deceptively official. The letterhead now included a seal that mimicked government certification. Their expressions had hardened since our last meeting, apparently ready for confrontation. "Mr. Walker," Caldwell began without preamble, "we are disappointed by your lack of initiative in addressing the violations we discussed." "I have done some research since we last spoke," I replied calmly. "County records show no registered homeowners association for this neighborhood." A flicker of annoyance crossed Perkins' face before he controlled it. "The association operates under covenant authority that predates county registration requirements." It was a smooth lie, delivered with practiced ease. I had faced professional deceivers before, men who would look you in the eye while planning your execution. These two were amateurs by comparison, but dangerous in their own way. "Then you will not mind providing the founding documents and current bylaws," I suggested. "My attorney has requested complete transparency before we proceed." "Your attorney involvement is unnecessary and provocative," Caldwell responded, his voice lowering. "It also substantially increases the enforcement penalties we are authorized to impose." At that moment, Emma called out to me, "Daddy, look at my castle. I made a moat with a drawbridge." Both men turned toward her voice. Caldwell's gaze lingered on her play equipment, then swept across her sandbox. That play structure was installed without approval, and that sandbox constitutes an unapproved landscape feature. "My daughter's play equipment is not subject to external approval," I stated firmly. Perkins stepped closer, keeping his voice low. "As community enforcement officers, we have obligations to report unsafe conditions for minors." The implication hung in the air between us, unmistakable in its threat. My pulse quickened, though years of training kept my expression neutral. "It would be unfortunate if authorities had to investigate potential endangerment situations," Caldwell added, glancing meaningfully toward Emma. "Child welfare agencies take these matters very seriously." Though my expression remained neutral, something fundamental shifted inside me. The same protective instinct that had carried me through combat zones now fully activated. They had crossed a line that transformed this from harassment to something much more personal. "I suggest you leave my property immediately," I said, my voice deliberately calm. Any further communication should go through my attorney. We hate to see families separated over simple compliance issues, Perkins remarked as they retreated toward their car. Children thrive in stable environments. Your daughter seems happy here. It would be a shame to disrupt that. I watched them drive away, my mind calculating threat assessments and response scenarios. The mention of my daughter had changed everything. This was no longer about fraudulent fees or false authority. They had threatened my family. That evening, I visited Sarah Johnson again. Her eyes welled with tears as she confirmed my suspicions. They reported me to Child Services last month, she whispered, glancing toward her sleeping children's rooms. Claimed I had yard hazards that endangered my kids. It was after I told them I could not pay their latest fine. What happened? I asked, already knowing the fundamentals of their strategy. The caseworker found nothing wrong, but it was humiliating. Having strangers inspect your home, question your parenting. She wiped her eyes. I started paying their fees again after that. I cannot risk losing my children. By midnight, I had installed security cameras covering every approach to my property. Small, discreet models that military contractors used in sensitive areas overseas. I positioned recording devices for all future interactions and began a detailed log that would have made my former intelligence officers proud. Every contact, every threat, documented with precision. I called Davis again, updating him on the escalation. They threatened to report me to Child Services, I explained. They have done it to others already. That changes things, Davis replied, his voice grave. This is now potential witness intimidation, and threatening to make false reports to authorities is criminal in itself. I need to accelerate the timeline, I told him. They are targeting vulnerable people, and now they have threatened my daughter. Be careful, Jack, Davis cautioned. Document everything but do not provoke them. I agreed verbally, but my mind was already formulating more aggressive countermeasures. I was no longer just a homeowner being harassed. I was a father protecting his child, and that made me infinitely more dangerous than these petty criminals could possibly understand. That night, I checked on Emma 3 times as she slept. Each time, I promised her silently that no one would ever take her from me. No one would ever make her feel unsafe in her own home. The skills I had honed in service to my country would now serve a more personal mission, protecting what mattered most. The face on my laptop screen belonged to Martinez, my former unit's intelligence specialist who now worked in private security. His familiar features were illuminated by the blue glow of his computer as we connected via secure video call. It was 3 in the morning, but Martinez had always been a night owl. "Good to see you, Walker," he greeted, "though I am guessing this is not a social call at this hour." "I need background checks," I explained, sending him the photographs I had taken of Caldwell and Perkins. "Everything you can find, especially criminal history." "Consider it done. Give me 24 hours. Martinez understood urgency without requiring explanation. It was why we had worked so well together in the field. The next day, Martinez sent encrypted files containing background reports that confirmed my suspicions. Richard Caldwell, real name Richard Conley, had multiple fraud charges in 3 states. Michael Perkins had served 18 months for intimidation and running a protection racket in a small town in Oregon. Both had established a pattern of similar schemes in other counties, moving on when authorities got too close. "They are working their way across the state," Martinez explained during our follow-up call. "Setting up fake HOAs in neighborhoods where the real ones failed to materialize or dissolved. They target areas with higher property values but limited community cohesion." Armed with this information, I contacted Davis, arranging to meet at a small coffee shop downtown. We chose a corner booth where we could not be overheard, and I deliberately sat facing the entrance, old habits dying hard. What you have described crosses multiple legal boundaries, Davis explained as we mapped out a strategy on paper rather than digital devices. Wire fraud, impersonating officials, extortion, filing false reports, and now threatening a minor. What is the best approach? I asked, stirring my untouched coffee. Build an airtight case and take it to the district attorney, Davis advised. But we need more than just your testimony. We need multiple victims willing to come forward, documented evidence of their fraudulent claims, and ideally, proof of them committing an actual crime. That last part might be the simplest to arrange, I noted, already formulating a plan. That evening, I invited selected neighbors to a meeting in my garage. I chose carefully, people who had been victimized but possessed the courage to stand against the fake enforcers. Sarah Johnson arrived first, followed by the Wilsons, and eventually the quiet couple from the corner who had been reluctant to discuss the matter previously. What they are doing is illegal, I explained to the gathered group, and together we can stop them. Elderly Mr. Wilson revealed detailed records of every payment he had made over 3 years, organized by date and alleged violation. Sarah offered her formal testimony about the false child services report. Even the quiet couple from the corner agreed to serve as witnesses, the husband explaining that his reluctance stemmed from fear of retaliation rather than indifference. They threatened to contact my employer, he admitted. I cannot afford to lose my job, not in this economy. We established communication protocols and documentation standards. Each household agreed to record all future interactions and share information about enforcement visits. I transformed their fear into coordinated resistance, just as I had once turned frightened recruits into effective team members. What exactly are you planning? Sarah asked as the meeting concluded. To catch them in the act, I replied simply, preferably committing a felony that cannot be ignored. After everyone left, I sketched out surveillance positions and camera placements around my property, creating overlapping fields that would capture irrefutable evidence of their criminal activity. I established sight lines and blind approaches, treating my suburban home like a tactical operation zone. The plan took shape over 3 more days. Davis provided legal guidance while Martinez supplied specialized equipment that would document everything with unimpeachable clarity. I contacted another former teammate, Rodriguez, who now worked in private security. He agreed to assist with the operation without hesitation. So we are setting a trap, Rodriguez confirmed when he arrived at my house the day before we planned to execute. And you think they will take the bait? They escalate when challenged, I explained. And nothing challenges their authority more than complete absence. If they believe I am not home and Emma is being watched by someone unfamiliar with their scheme, they will try to intimidate the new person, Rodriguez finished. Basic predator behavior, target the perceived weakest link. Exactly, and we will be recording everything. That night I discussed the situation with Emma in simple terms she could understand. Some people might come to our house tomorrow. They might say things that are not true, but I need you to know that you are safe. I will always keep you safe. Her small hand squeezed mine with complete trust. I know, Daddy. You are the strongest daddy in the world. I kissed her forehead, grateful for her confidence but aware of the complexity ahead. Rodriguez will be pretending to babysit you tomorrow. I will be nearby but hiding. It is like a special game of hide and seek. With the bad men as the seekers, she asked, her perceptiveness sometimes startling me. "Yes, but they will never find me until I want them to." I brushed her hair back from her forehead. "And they will never, ever take you anywhere." She nodded solemnly, accepting this explanation with the peculiar adaptability of children. As I tucked her in, I reflected on how my military experience had prepared me for nearly any threat, except perhaps the fierce, primal protectiveness that fatherhood had awakened in me. Tomorrow would bring everything to a head. I would use every skill I had developed in combat to protect what mattered most in peace. The fake enforcers had no idea what they had stumbled into when they threatened my family. The trap was baited with careful precision. I parked my truck at a neighbor's house and positioned myself in the converted shed behind my property, which offered a clear view of the front approach. Through the small window, I watched Rodriguez, posing as a babysitter, playing board games with Emma in the living room. The security feeds displayed on my tablet showed every angle of my property in high definition. Rodriguez wore civilian clothes but carried himself with the unmistakable alertness of someone who had seen combat. To the untrained eye, he appeared to be simply an attentive caregiver, but I knew he could neutralize threats with devastating efficiency if required. Still, our plan depended on avoiding direct confrontation if possible. The evidence was what mattered. Eagle in position, I spoke softly into the communication device. "All cameras operational." "Copy that," Rodriguez replied through his concealed earpiece. "Little Bird is enjoying Candyland and asking when lunch will be served." I smiled despite the tension. Emma had adapted to our game with remarkable resilience. She understood only that some not nice people might visit, and that she should stay close to Rodriguez if they did. At precisely 11:43 a.m., right on schedule, a silver sedan pulled up in front of the house. The timing validated my assessment of their methodical approach to targeting homes. They believed I would be at work, the house vulnerable with only a caregiver present. Caldwell and Perkins emerged from the vehicle, both wearing what appeared to be official-looking windbreakers with a fake seal embroidered on the breast pocket. They carried clipboards and a leather portfolio containing documents, new props for an elevated performance. "Targets approaching front entrance," I narrated for the recording. "Note the counterfeit official apparel and documentation." They rang the doorbell, standing with practiced authoritative postures. Rodriguez answered with exactly the right balance of confusion and concern. "Can I help you, gentlemen?" he asked, blocking the entrance just enough to establish boundary without appearing suspicious. "County Housing Enforcement," Caldwell announced, flashing a badge too quickly to examine properly. "We need to speak with the homeowner, Jack Walker." "He is at work," Rodriguez replied. "I am watching his daughter until he returns this evening." Perkins consulted his clipboard with furrowed brow. "That is problematic. We have an emergency condemnation order for this property due to multiple code violations that present imminent danger." The camera above the door captured their fraudulent documents in perfect detail. The counterfeit government seals, the falsified signatures, all evidence of multiple felonies. My heart rate remained steady, years of operating under pressure serving me well. "Condemnation," Rodriguez's voice carried the perfect note of alarm. "What does that mean exactly?" "The property has been deemed unsafe for habitation," Caldwell explained, his voice carrying through the open windows. "Structural concerns, potential toxic materials, and safety hazards." Rodriguez's performance was flawless, projecting increasing distress. "But there is a child here. What am I supposed to do?" At that moment, Emma appeared in the doorway behind Rodriguez, clutching her favorite stuffed rabbit. The timing could not have been better if we had planned it, though we deliberately had not involved her in this aspect. "Hello," she said simply, studying the strangers with innocent curiosity. Perkins crouched down with practiced kindness that never reached his eyes. "Hello there, sweetheart. What is your name?" "Emma," she replied, staying half-hidden behind Rodriguez's leg as we had instructed her to do with any strangers. "Well, Emma, we need to take you somewhere safe," Perkins explained in a gentle voice that made my skin crawl. "Just until your daddy fixes the dangerous problems with your house." My pulse quickened despite my training. Watching someone reach toward my child-activated instincts far more primal than anything I had experienced in combat. "I have official temporary custody authorization," Caldwell added, producing another falsified document, "for the child's protection until the parent can arrange suitable alternative housing." "I should call her father," Rodriguez suggested, reaching for his phone. "There is no time," Perkins insisted, his voice hardening. "The condemnation is effective immediately. We have a safe facility where she will be properly cared for until her father can claim her." The shorter enforcer reached toward Emma, his hand extending to take hers. "Come with us, sweetie. We will get you some ice cream while we wait for your daddy." That moment, that single gesture toward my child, ignited something beyond tactical calculation. I triggered the silent alarm alerting local police of the situation in progress, then moved from my hiding place with controlled precision. I emerged from the side yard, moving with the silent efficiency that had once made me effective in combat zones. Time seemed to slow as protective instinct overrode everything else. I covered the distance to the front door in seconds, my presence undetected until I spoke. "Remove your hand from my property," I said, my voice deadly quiet. "Both my daughter and my home." Their expressions shifted from confidence to fear as they recognized what they had awakened in me. Not just a homeowner, but a father with specific training to neutralize threats. Caldwell recovered first, attempting to maintain the facade. "Mr. Walker, we have a condemnation order for this property. You and your daughter need to vacate immediately." "What you have," I replied, stepping closer, "are falsified documents, counterfeit badges, and about 3 minutes before the police arrive to arrest you for attempted kidnapping, fraud, and impersonating government officials." Perkins reached inside his jacket, a motion that triggered my combat reflexes. "I would reconsider that movement very carefully," I advised him, my stance shifting subtly to offensive readiness. "Your next decision determines whether you leave in handcuffs or an ambulance." Understanding dawned in their eyes, the sudden, terrible recognition that they had miscalculated catastrophically. They had built their scheme on intimidating vulnerable targets. They had never encountered someone trained to counter threats with overwhelming force. "We can work something out," Caldwell suggested, backing toward their vehicle. "This is just a misunderstanding." "The only misunderstanding," I replied, advancing as they retreated, "was your belief that threatening my child would end any way but this." In the distance, police sirens wailed, growing closer. Emma remained safely behind Rodriguez, watching with solemn eyes as her father transformed from peaceful gardener to immovable guardian. The enforcers glanced toward their car, clearly calculating whether they could escape before police arrived. "I would not," I advised them, reading their intent. "Running only adds charges and eliminates any chance of leniency." In that moment, with police approaching and their scheme collapsing, Perkins made a desperate choice. He lunged toward me, perhaps hopping to clear a path to escape. It would prove to be a profound miscalculation. My training took over instantly. each movement calculated not to cause permanent injury but to neutralize the threat decisively. As Perkins lunged forward, I redirected his momentum while applying precise pressure to his elbow joint. The technique rendered his arm temporarily useless as he gasped in pain. Caldwell, seeing his partner neutralized so efficiently, reached inside his jacket. Whether for a weapon or phone, I could not risk finding out. I executed a sweeping maneuver that sent him to the ground, controlling his descent to prevent serious injury but ensuring he could not continue any aggressive action. Within seconds, both men found themselves restrained with zip ties I had kept ready for this scenario. The entire physical confrontation lasted less than 15 seconds, brief, controlled, and proportionate to the threat presented. At no point did I strike or apply techniques that would cause lasting damage. "Daddy," Emma called from the doorway where Rodriguez shielded her view of the confrontation. "Everything is fine, sweetheart," I assured her, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through my system. "These men just need to wait here for the police." The enforcers struggled briefly against their restraints before recognizing the futility. "You have assaulted us," Caldwell protested, attempting to regain some control of the situation. "We are government officials conducting lawful business." "You are criminals impersonating officials while attempting to abduct a child," I corrected him calmly. "Every word and action since you arrived has been recorded from multiple angles. Your fraudulent documents are clearly visible on camera. Your attempt to take my daughter is captured in high definition with audio." Police sirens grew louder until 2 patrol cars pulled up in front of my house, lights flashing. 4 officers emerged, hands near their weapons as they assessed the unusual scene before them. "Officers," I greeted them, keeping my hands visible. "These men attempted to fraudulently condemn my property and abduct my child using falsified government credentials. I have placed them under citizen's arrest." The lead officer approached cautiously. "Sir, I need you to step away from those individuals." I complied immediately, moving to stand near my front steps. "My name is Jack Walker. I reported a fraudulent scheme targeting homeowners in this neighborhood. These men escalated to attempted kidnapping today." Rodriguez emerged from the house, displaying his hands clearly. "I am Alexander Rodriguez, former Marine Corps, currently employed by Sentinel Security. I witnessed everything and can provide a statement." The officers secured the scene with professional efficiency, separating all parties while they established the facts. I remained calm and cooperative, understanding their need to verify every aspect of this unusual situation. When they approached Caldwell and Perkins, the officers discovered fake badges, falsified court documents, and counterfeit government identification. Their vehicle contained a trunk full of fraudulent violation notices organized by street address. "Detective Harrison will want to see this," one officer remarked to his partner as they cataloged the evidence. Once the initial security concerns were addressed, I methodically presented the comprehensive evidence package prepared with my lawyer. It included surveillance footage, witness statements from neighbors, financial records from victims, background reports on both enforcers, and county documentation proving no legitimate HOA existed in our neighborhood. Detective Harrison arrived 30 minutes later, a seasoned investigator who reviewed the evidence with practiced neutrality. "You have been very thorough, Mr. Walker," he commented, examining the documentation. "Most people do not maintain such detailed records." My previous occupation emphasized the importance of documentation, I explained simply. After interviewing all parties and reviewing the video evidence, the detective confirmed what I already knew. These individuals match descriptions from complaints across 3 counties, he informed me. We have been building a case for months, but victims have been reluctant to come forward. As the officers read Caldwell and Perkins their rights, I felt no satisfaction, only relief. The tactical aspects of the confrontation had lasted less than 30 seconds, but the impact would endure much longer. Watching these men being placed in separate police vehicles provided the first real sense of security I had felt since their initial appearance on my property. Emma approached cautiously after the police cars departed, taking my hand in hers. "Are the bad men gone now, Daddy?" I knelt to her eye level, gently squeezing her small hand. "Yes, sweetheart, they are gone and they will not come back." "You protected me," she stated with absolute confidence. "Always," I promised, the single word carrying the weight of everything I had ever trained for, fought for, or believed in. Rodriguez approached after ensuring all recording devices were secured. "Clean operation," he observed quietly, "though I note you did not actually break their arms." Despite what the neighbors might claim, I acknowledged with the slightest smile, proportional response is still the standard. That evening, as Emma slept peacefully in her room, I received calls from neighbors who had witnessed the confrontation. Word spread quickly through the community. The fake enforcers who had terrorized vulnerable residents for years had finally faced justice. And in their downfall, something unexpected had begun to emerge, a genuine community rising from the remnants of fear. 3 weeks later, I stood before my neighbors in our community park. Families sat on blankets and lawn chairs as I explained the full extent of the scam that had victimized so many. The evening sun cast long shadows across the grass as children played nearby, their laughter a stark contrast to the serious matters being discussed. The district attorney has filed 78 separate charges against Caldwell and Perkins, I informed the gathered residents, including attempted kidnapping, fraud, extortion, and impersonating government officials. Sarah Johnson raised her hand. "What about the money they collected from us over the years?" "The judge has ordered full restitution to all victims," I explained. "Mr. Wilson will receive his certified check for $5,000 first due to his age and circumstances. The court has frozen their assets to ensure everyone receives what they are owed." Relief washed over faces that had carried tension for too long. Elderly, Mrs. Wilson dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief while her husband patted her hand gently. "How did they get away with it for so long?" Someone called from the back of the gathering. "They targeted people who felt vulnerable or isolated," I explained. "They counted on fear and intimidation to prevent anyone from comparing notes or challenging their authority. They specifically chose neighborhoods where people lived separate lives." What had begun as an information session transformed into something more meaningful as neighbors who had previously kept their doors closed began sharing contact information and stories. People who had lived beside each other for years introduced themselves properly for the first time. A young father with twin toddlers stood up. "I moved in last month and was already getting notices. I thought this was just how suburbs worked." Laughter rippled through the crowd, the cathartic release of shared experience. "Since we now know definitively that no HOA exists here," Sarah suggested, "perhaps we should consider forming a legitimate neighborhood association, not for restrictions, but for mutual support."